Welcome to EIG's second in a series of webinars on unlocking employee engagement in root cause analysis. We're going to cover proven methods to slash risk events with our panel guest, Dr. Irene Legiec, founder of and CEO of IALS Consulting, Aaron Parr, founder and CEO of Enroute.io, and myself, Jim Vries, founder of Enhance International Group. We appreciate you taking the time to attend today's webinar on building your evolving resilient enterprise. That's our overall goal and support. And we're very happy to support you with over 110 webinars to date. And most importantly, we hope that your family is healthy and safe. This is the second in a series of webinars with Irene and Aaron, and we're focusing on unlocking the employee engagement as part of the root cause analysis, proven methods to slash risk events. You can find our first webinar on the EIG website, Capitalize on Your Mistakes, Empowering Root Cause Failure Analysis to Prevent Future Losses. And our next webinar in November, we have to get a date on it yet, but you'll see it soon, is going to focus more on the digital and AI collaboration tools for root cause failure analysis. This week, we will talk about more about the process and starting to inject some of those tools. And again, next month, we will focus on the tools themselves so you can feel more comfortable with them. And then our fourth webinar will be more focused on artificial intelligence, in that probably getting into large language models and how they can be used, and other Gen AI tools can be used for collaboration potential. Again, the deliverables today are addressing challenges in documenting root cause failure analysis events. We're getting into those best practices and showing you a roadmap, which will be the main part of the webinar, is walking through that roadmap in detail, and then interjecting employee engagement opportunities throughout that roadmap. That will give you a couple of case studies from Irene and Aaron, and then we'll talk about some of those AI machine learning collaboration tools, a little bit of that, a helpful hint for our next webinar, and then of course, we will end it with how does it hit your bottom line, and how do you sell it internally that this is the most important thing. With that, we're going to get into Irene to give an overview background on her company. Irene?
Hi, everyone. Our company provides focused and hands-on guidance and collaboration to lead sectors in operational excellence. There are 6 main areas that we work in: continuous improvement, driving either continuous improvement programs or setting up systems, providing some training and mentoring, focusing on engineering optimization. And I will say I don't do engineering design, but we look at the overall process to see how we can use the power of statistics to optimize your process. Focusing a lot on operational excellence, setting up those systems, looking at opportunities for standardization. And then where a lot of my work is right now active is ad hoc program management for helping senior leadership run special programs in their companies. Looking forward to talking with everybody today. And if you have an opportunity you'd like to discuss, send me a note. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. And thanks for having me on, Jim. My name is Aaron Parr. I have a background in chemical engineering, and I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. I've spent most of my career in sustainable energy before leaving the corporate world this year to start Enroute.io. Our goal is to develop a data-driven co-pilot for superior problem solving. And the first way we're doing that is by helping automate and streamline a lot of the RCA process. Right now, we're doing that through a software tool that has 3 main features. One, it provides pre-work polls. This is for Kaizen and RCA, but it helps your team uncover insights and biases early on to help streamline your process. Next, we offer smart RCA automation. This is not about automating an entire RCA. This is about automating just pieces of the pre-work to help accelerate root cause identification, as well as help point out some common pitfalls in the first part of the RCA process. And then finally, to tie that all to the bottom line, we have best practice integration, where we help you implement proven solutions faster with automated insights directly tied to your SOPs and standard work. Thank you, and excited to be here today.
Thanks, Aaron. With that, a little bit about Enhance International Group. We're a group of over 60 partners with our common goal of linking strategy to execution. Of course, today we're looking at how do we drive visibility to risk to create action in today's webinar. But our overall goal is to help you help yourself. We want to get in and out. We seek to seize your untapped opportunities within your company. We have lots of fractional resources, and we're aligned to people, process, data, technology. So our 60 partners cover quite a spectrum of solutions, from everything from digital twins to predictive index, helping from an HR perspective, to supply chain risk and resiliency. With that, we're going to get started with one of my favorite guys out there, Richard Branson. How do you describe Richard? Well, I kind of came up with this doing a little searching. He's obviously English. He's an explorer. He's an entrepreneurial. He's an inspirational leader. He's an innovator and risk taker. So he knows a lot about risk if you follow him. And he knows how to turn risk into opportunities. So I think he's the perfect one to kick us off here with what his ethos is, and that is clients do not come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of the clients. So a great way to get started here and kick us off into the webinar. From an agenda perspective, we're going to look at the challenges in documenting root cause failure analysis. Those events is always a challenge. The event happens, everybody scurries around to address those issues at that time. But we'll get into how do you make sure that you do perform good documentation of the event. Then we get into the roadmap of documenting the event with integrated digital and artificial intelligence, machine learning features. Aaron and Irene will get into their case studies to share with you, and then we'll get into those financial impacts. With that, Irene.
So there are some very real challenges in implementing this process in an organization, and some of those challenges can be prevented. First and foremost is prevent the 5 whys process from turning into the 5 blames. It really should not focus on finding who the employee is to blame. Make sure that you begin with a preliminary investigation by collecting the data, focusing on the facts, focusing on the observations. Leadership must drive this process and support it, and it must be visible leadership and felt leadership. You need to make sure that the actions are carried out and that they have been deemed and verified that they're effective. Make sure it's the right team and ensure full participation. I was working at one company and RCAs were done by one person in his office. Never involved the plants or the operators. And then make sure remote team members are included in the process. Something that is really important here is to make sure that if you do implement corrective actions, that they're effective. There's a study from the VA New York Harbor Healthcare System that only 39% of their RCA actions were actually fully implemented. And of those, only 74% were effective. So the real work starts after the team meetings. So focus on the entire process.
All right, so before diving into kind of the specific best practices and technologies that you can use to enhance RCAs, I kind of wanted to talk about what the current state of RCA is at a lot of companies today. So a lot of people do RCA in the exact same way that it was done in the 1980s. There's reliance on manual steps, there's paper trails, and there's a lot of isolated analysis, like the guy that sat in his office and never left, as Irene mentioned, that's going to fail to leverage a lot of the modern tools that are available. And these practices can reduce efficiency and limit inclusive participation. So this leaves us with an opportunity to innovate how we do RCA. Modern technology can streamline RCA, and you can see increased efficiency and inclusiveness. Technology allows all voices to be heard and creates a more collaborative environment. But as we start to incorporate technology, there's of course going to be barriers and a learning curve. So teams often face challenges with two things: accountability and attendance when they start providing hybrid options, remote options, and trying to just do things more remotely as a team. This applies outside of RCA as well. Now, scheduling RCA sessions can become difficult. Participants might feel disconnected. People might turn off their camera and but still join the meeting and not participate. But ultimately, these things just result in lower engagement, which is going to reduce the effectiveness of your RCA. So how do you overcome this? And we'll touch on this a lot throughout this webinar, but collaboration tools, providing both real-time and asynchronous collaboration tools. This improves accountability and engagement, and by offering flexible scheduling and automating parts of the RCA process.
Thanks, Aaron. That sets the stage for us as we get into the root cause failure analysis roadmap. But before we get too deep into this, we want to gain some feedback from you, the audience, on a polling question on what actions you would take or have taken to keep employees actively involved in the RCA process. Some of the things that I see already are ensure inclusion, communication, case studies, sticky notes. So we're going to keep this open throughout this section, and we appreciate if you would join with us here with your comments. Aaron, any comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, sticky notes jumps out to me. I am a huge advocate for using technology when it's necessary, when it can improve the process or the specific situation. But I still use sticky notes almost anytime I'm facilitating an RCA or a Kaizen event or just doing a simple standalone brainstorming session. Sticky notes are a great way to get people talking, to share ideas, and to collaborate. So absolutely love sticky notes, and it's one of the things that I think there's still a gap in technology where we could actually see better use of making online sticky note tools as efficient as sticky notes are in a conference room.
Thanks, Aaron. And we'll actually show you one of those tools somewhere, maybe this week, but maybe next week on virtual sticky note tools. So it's a great point. So Irene?
So the one thing that I really like to make sure of that we do is ensure inclusion. That one stands out to me, and that's from not only a diversity perspective, but also from a personality perspective. There might be some folks that are fairly introverted and quiet and aren't that comfortable in speaking, or there's just one loud person in the room that's just dominating the whole conversation. So making sure everyone has a way to participate is good, and actually using the sticky notes to write things down and then read them out loud gives them that voice in a safe manner, so that they do feel fully included and heard.
I love the participation. Thanks so much. Just a note, to please enter an underscore between word phrases if you want to get your word phrases if they're important. If not, that's okay too. But fantastic feedback. Thank you so much. A lot of good ideas here. Yeah, we're going to come back to this at the end of this section. So keep jotting it down. You can start keep entering them in to the full EV. With that, Irene's up for the next slide here.
So if you think about the roadmap for an RCA, we introduced this concept at the last meeting. It's important that we go through it again. First things foremost, stabilize the scene and take care of people. Do not disrupt the evidence or the scene if possible. Take pictures and video. If there's a tank spill or something like that, obviously shore up, stabilize the scene, and make sure everyone's safe. First things you need to do is make sure you conduct your communications as required by your state, your federal, and corporate guidelines. Make sure leaders are aware. Second is you establish your incident investigation team and start gathering the preliminary data. Developing the problem statement. What are you really trying to solve? Using the 5W2H process is really important, and we'll describe that later. Need to organize the facts. And so it's pictures, equipment assessments, gathering the data from the historian, eyewitness interviews. Really, you want to put on your investigator hat and understand what happened. Then you're going to conduct the root cause analysis. And so you really focus on the causal tree analysis and identify the root causes and possible corrective actions. Once you've done that, you want to develop and refine those and prioritize using a 2x2 grid to select the most effective actions to take. And then think about mistake proving it. Make sure that the actions that you are going to implement are going to be effective in solving the problem. And then make sure then you assign the actions using the SMART objective style so that they're crisp, they're measurable, and that you don't give someone a large project like boil the entire ocean. It has to be very, very crisp. You want to report out of the recommendations, and you also want to follow up to make sure that they have been verified effective. Take a look at the data before and after. Did it solve the problem? You'll see the typical timeline for this. We're not going to solve and do an RCA overnight. It should take a couple of days. More simpler ones will take a few days. If it is a more complex one, or you have to send some materials to be sent offsite for laboratory analysis, let's say some metallurgy, you might have to wait a few weeks for that data to come back. So the timing will be dependent on the complexity of the situation. And the reason why I stress the timing here is do not rush through the process, because you might end up not including some key information, and then you will not be able to solve the problem. So think about your team members. You want to make sure it's a cross-functional team. The one thing that's really important here is have a facilitator. That's someone who runs the process. Make sure that you're following the process, is reading the room, making sure that everyone's getting to participate. You're going to want your quality manager, your EHS officer, the operations manager, or the first line supervisors, those frontline personnel that are involved in the process. If you need to include some subject matter experts from the region or from corporate, they should be there. So let's say it is an issue with corrosion and metallurgy. You want to make sure that that expert does participate, and you want to include those incident witnesses. Now, here's the problem. A lot of these people are not located at the facility. In my last role, I had several plants that only had 3 or 4 people, and everybody else was at different facilities or remote. So you either need to arrange travel, which can be very costly, or you need to use collaboration tools to make sure it's a thorough process. But as Aaron had said, you want to make sure that they're able to use it and they're not just sitting there behind the computer on silent and not on camera and playing video games elsewhere. They need to be included. They're important.
All right. So once you've put your team together, I wanted to talk about how are some best practices in gathering data as a team. So the most important thing is you want to be objective, focusing on gathering just the facts. And this is going to help you build a comprehensive, objective view. Team engagement is critical to do that because that's going to ensure that all insights from all parties are considered, and it's going to help you avoid what could be critical clues. Now, what types of data might be included? Of course, there's obvious examples, but some more unobvious ones might be pictures, procedures, checklists, and the obvious one is measurements from the time of the incident. There might also be a need to go check systems. So data from computer control systems, maps of where the incident occurred, sketches if nothing like that exists, and process diagrams, which is going to help you ultimately visualize the incident as a team. Some atypical data sources that might be forgotten is reports, emails, and any background paperwork that could include potential clues like daily handwritten logs. Now, data centralization is important for collaboration here. So I would recommend scanning everything into an electronic format. This doesn't need to be complicated. This can just be snapping a picture of it in your mobile phone and storing everything in a shared folder. That's important. I have messed this up in the past. If you have a shared folder, but it's only a couple people, ultimately what you're going to do is the first time you sit down to really dig into the RCA, you're going to be spent catching everybody up on the information that everybody could have caught up with beforehand if you had made it accessible. So that's an important piece. Next, you want to involve the team in deciding how far back to collect the data. I've heard in a lot of different types of problems when we were doing an RCA, both quality and safety, oh, that's a seasonal effect that happens seasonally. It's just like that in the summer. If that's the case and there are seasonal effects, you need to get more than a year's worth of data to prove that. So talk with the team about those types of things, see if there might be seasonal effects. And if more than a year's worth of data is available, try and get 2 or 3 to see if there are seasonal effects that are important. Now, quickly, the way I've started using actually AI tools for this step is bias detection. So I pull in a lot of atypical data sources like reports, emails, and summary backgrounds. And you can use large language models is the easiest way to do this. You could ask ChatGPT to help you. In fact, I'd recommend doing that after this webinar. But also there's more advanced sentiment analysis and bias detection tools, which will allow you to process large amounts of this atypical data and draw conclusions on what types of biases might exist out there that'll end up hurting you when you're trying to determine what the real root causes are.
So if you think about it, the next step in the process is developing the problem statement. The problem statement, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? This is developed and confirmed at all of the meeting sessions. It's an evergreen document. It enables the team to clearly define what is the issue that we need to eliminate or reduce. And the reason why this is important from an employee engagement perspective is that the entire team must participate on this and develop the problem statement together so that it ensures that everyone's included and working together to achieving the same goal. What is absolutely critical is that it is not mandated and handed down from leadership. Instead, leadership provides some guidance, provides the KPIs that they want to that the team to follow, but the team has to form their own problem statement. And why are we keep on stressing employee engagement as part of the process? If you kind of take a step back from an operational excellence perspective, yes, we want to reduce failures. We want to reduce the risks to personnel, but you also want to build high performance work teams at the same time. And this is the way to do it. Next step.
So Irene, we got a question in here about leadership not supporting the RCA and how you deal with when the plant manager is more worried about getting, or maybe not the plant manager, but certain people in that plant more worried about getting production and you're not getting cooperation. It could be at a ship soup level or what are some of the best practices that you've done to help bring them along?
Well, and that's a really great question. This is something that's key is making sure leadership is aligned. And so it's really about presenting to them what is the business case for conducting these is to prevent it from occurring again. So whether it's lost time because of an incident and lost production, that translates into revenue, lost revenue. If you can demonstrate that you've taken away that frequency, you've actually are saving money or losing less money. So it becomes a wise business decision to make. So you have to make sure that you can translate um the the business case for the leadership to ensure their support.
Thanks, Irene. With that, there you go.
So defining the problem statement accurately using the 5W2H method. So we're going to just kind of go through this. So guy comes in, it's like, well, that blankety blank blank piece of equipment broke again. Okay, that's really not an effective problem statement. So you kind of guide the team through, well, what happened? Well, filter press number 1 went offline, production was stopped, and product couldn't be delivered to the customer. Well, where did that happen? It's in the operations press building. Well, when did it occur? Well, it's on the evening shift, 8:32 p.m. on March 23rd. Well, who was involved? Well, it's Pat, the plant person, and the night shift team. Well, why? Well, sensor 321 malfunction. Well, how? Well, it's a process interlock which shuts off the press. Well, how often does it happen? Well, it happened twice in that shift. So then the problem statement becomes a lot crisper, okay? It went offline after a series of malfunctions, which shuts the press off. This was the second time that it occurred, causing 4 hours of downtime and the missed delivery of product to a customer. And then you want to put in, this is where you put in the lost revenue piece. And you see how that is crisper in terms of this is a problem we're trying to solve. If you left it up with just the piece of equipment broke again, you would have a potential for starting the blame game for that night shift team and Pat the plant person, and that's not the effective way to go. And that drives to no solution. So using a well-defined problem statement is actually half the battle.
All right, organizing issues. So especially in RCA. So that's more than just sorting through problems. This is the piece where you're going to empower your team to actually think critically and cohesively together. If you're familiar with Lean Six Sigma and 5S, it's the same idea that 5S is not just cleaning. It's a starting point. Now, once you have the problem statement, you want to start thinking about organizing data as it comes in, as you're gathering it. So to do that, you consider the whole picture. I like to think about this through the fishbone categories: people, equipment, methods, environment, measurements, and materials. And doing this as a team, organizing this data as a team, is when you have the conversations that really identify the interconnections between those ideas. This is going to enable your team to spot relationships and patterns that you might miss if they had just been working in isolation, if there was just one person in an office gathering all the data sets that they had requested. Now, one way that I've been using large language models specifically to enhance this step of the process is to really fast track data analysis by identifying common themes in really large data sets. A really simple way to do this, and you can test it out today, is you can ask for your team to provide maybe 2 or 3 sentences about what they think about this RCA, what the background information is, and then provide those 10 answers to ChatGPT and say, could you summarize this and display the key themes relevant to an RCA? And then start your RCA conversation there. Now, the next piece here, as you're organizing issues, is to really use structured feedback so that voices from both introverts, extroverts, and everybody in between can be heard. So one way to do that is to use the round robin method. This is going to ensure equal contribution from all team members. And the way to ensure that you give everybody a chance is start with silent brainstorming for uninterrupted idea generation, and then follow that up with audible brainstorming to help build those connections and reinforce team engagement.
So there's a question in the chat here, Aaron, about the time. I think they're saying that they appreciate all the things that need to be done, but you know, there's a limited number of people to run the plant. And how do you keep the lights on, keep the plant running, or get the plant back up and running, and then taking time? How much time should be allocated for these meetings over what period of time and how do you schedule that, especially with hourly workers and overtime and so forth?
Yes. So this is where kind of automating and utilizing technology can really shine. Sometimes you have hourly employees and they are critical. They have been working at the plant for 30 years and they're truly the ones that are the expert at that process where the incident had occurred that you're doing an RCA about. Those are also some of the hardest people to get into a room, especially multiple times, to do things like organize your data, organize issues. But their feedback is still critical. So that might be a good time to go do in-person interviews. If the facilitator has extra time, you could save the hourly employee time by going and doing interviews and asking those questions and gathering that data from everybody that works in that area. You could do it over email. I've had a lot of luck actually utilizing email first. That's kind of like the the base technology that you can get a lot of this information from. But I do want to highlight it is definitely important to involve them and include them. And just as important as it is to keep the plant running, because this is how you eliminate reoccurring issues and make sure that everybody's not wasting their time doing an RCA.
Just building on that point, what we often did at plants is we had a pizza lunch brainstorming session that generally attracts a few people.
Food works well.
Pizza, pizza, pizza.
So one thing to note when you're conducting the root cause analysis, with all the teams in all my history, there are a lot of really good people that have some really good ideas, and they're going to pop out during the discussion. Don't ignore them, capture them. So it's likely that as you're identifying possible root causes, people are going to start popping up. Well, we can fix this or we can do this. Make sure that you capture those corrective actions as the thought occurs to them. Write them down as they come out. Give them some paper and pens, or our traditional Post-it notes that every single continuous improvement person loves. But also at the same time, from a facilitation perspective, do not allow the team to discuss these possible solutions yet. As tempting as it might be, but make sure you fully work through the causal tree first. So now, if you think about the root cause, the RCFA steps, it's you want to do the causal tree analysis, you identify the root causes, and you identify the corrective actions. And one of the typical ways is using the 5 why methodology. And we're going to talk about that and explore that issue mainly. And it's literally about you keep asking why until you ultimately identify the reason why the problem originated. Now, it shouldn't, if it takes less than 5 whys or more than 5 whys, that's okay. But the idea is you keep asking why until you hit the potential root cause. The other thing too is it should not look like a stick. It has branches. This is a Y tree, not a Y stick. So if you go to the next slide, Jim. As you can see from the problem statement, remember that well-defined problem statement, you identify what are the key issues with that, and you should be able to lead right back up to it. What are the conditions or actions that are necessary to cause that to happen? Are they sufficient to result in the effect or the condition that led to the problem. And then you keep drilling down to possible causal factor or effect. And then you go to the next few layers until you start defining, this is the actual root cause. Here are possible root causes. The other thing that you want to think about too is what is the root cause and what is a potentially contributing factor? Those are also important to note as well in the process.
All right, so this is a example of a safety process incident using the Y tree. Notice that it's not linear. It has multiple branches, sometimes 3 or more, for a specific potential cause. Now, this is really a tool that uncovers deeper causes by asking why over and over again, right? And the goal is to get past just surface level causes like human error, as Irene mentioned. Now, in this example, it really does show that human error is just the starting point, not a root cause. Human error, if you stop at it, you're really overlooking systemic issues like environment or process flaws that had set those people up to fail. So at the top, we have a jet fuel tank ignition. And then below, we have factors like inadequate pre-entry procedures and lack of gas monitoring. Now, we also dig deeper to uncover potential root causes that are broader, like poor safety culture, untrained personnel, and pressure to meet deadlines, as we mentioned earlier in the webinar. Now, you can use AI tools and other technology tools to process incident reports, maintenance log, and team feedback that's going to help surface trends and reoccurring risks while building a 5Y tree. But again, a simple way to test out what this new technology means for RCA is to, again, start with ChatGPT and say, provide 5 additional whys that could be the root cause to this causal factor, and then list no gas monitoring using gas tester to see if it could provide any deeper options. Now, a word of caution, it by no means is right 100% of the time, so use caution, use your judgment. But use it as a conversation starting point for your team to help build this Y tree out further.
So, Aaron, we have a question in here about this. These causal trees can get quite large and onerous. What is your recommended procedure to go through and validate which of these are the possible root causes?
Right.
What do you do to validate what is the true root cause, and how do you collect that data to validate that?
As far as collecting the data, I'll start there. I usually go back to the data collection step with what I think are the 1 or 2 top root causes for this problem. And then I see if I can go prove it or if the team can go prove it, right? Because this is a team exercise. So for lack of standard operating procedure, this is a great example of where you might use atypical data. You should go interview with some of the people out in the field again and see if they think that really explains the story. Maybe someone that wasn't involved in building that Y tree.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so on this slide, I really want to introduce that even though the 5 Whys technique is a powerful tool for identifying root causes, it's easy to misuse because it is so simple. Remember, the point is to move into the deeper issues and find uncover the real issue that's underlying all of this, not the obvious stuff, right? So on the left, we have an example of effective questioning. And again, this is linear, but you really do want to branch out as you're actually building a tree. But for the sake of this example, we have parts are out of spec. Why? Because the wrong tool was used. Why do we use the wrong tool? The tool was burned out due to high oil temperature. Now, further questioning reveals that there was no temperature standard, which is a process failure, right? Not a human failure. And this shows how missing system elements, not individual mistakes, are often the true root cause if we spend the time to dig deeper. So on the right, we have an example of ineffective questioning, where it's the same incident, but the root cause they identified was budget spent on office decor which is really an excuse, right, for not having the right tool instead of a root cause. So this shifts the conversation to blame instead of actually fixing the system. And it's what I would call a false root cause. And that's going to derail the rest of your process. It, doesn't usually jump out this early in the process if you aren't trained to identify it. But when you start developing countermeasures, you'll absolutely realize that, maybe we didn't get the right root cause. Maybe we should go back. And again, technology tools today can help you track patterns in data, like I mentioned a little bit on the last slide, like temperature tool usage, budget allocation, and that's ultimately going to highlight or at least prove to you that you are at the underlying problem and that this isn't a false root cause.
So Aaron, we have another question in about root causes, and very often people blame the standard operating procedure and says, oh, we're just going to update the SOP, or we're going to give the operator a cheat sheet, or we're going to remind them in the daily meeting about watching out for XYZ. How do you classify those type of improvements?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get to that in a couple slides. Actually, we're going to talk about the hierarchy of controls and corrective actions. But just to quickly answer that, and again, I'll answer it more in depth in a few slides. But it's really, if those are your resulting corrective actions, you probably didn't find the real failure point that caused your incident. You didn't find the real root cause. And again, I'll get into that in a few slides on the matrix.
Okay.
Speaking of
Look
matrix,
forward to it.
thank you. This is not the matrix I was talking about, but this is a corrective actions 2x2 matrix. On the y-axis, you have impact, and on the x-axis, you have ease of implementation. This is an essential tool. I swear by it. I've used it in almost every RCA, Kaizen event to really organize our solutions after we bring it. So on the y-axis, we have impact. This measures, how well the action addresses the actual root cause. For example, a key question I like to ask myself to understand where a specific corrective action falls on this is, does the action eliminate the root cause or just improve detection? Now, moving to the x-axis, we have ease of implementation. This gauges how easy or difficult the action will be to implement. And of course, this is qualitative, right? So teams might want to consider cost qualitatively here, or they could leave it entirely for a later conversation by doing a more in-depth ROI analysis, especially if the corrective action is more complex. But regardless of cost, you want to talk about other hidden costs, right? The amount of, do we have the necessary manpower to get this corrective action? Do we have a person with the right skill set to accomplish this corrective action, and did we assign it to them? So really a qualitative analysis on implementation. And ultimately, this is going to simplify your decision making, and it improves employee engagement by giving everyone a platform to talk where, how difficult they would think a specific action is, as well as how well it relates back to the root causes.
So a question from somebody saying that they've done these before and they've often had difficulties in aligning on how easy an improvement is, a just do it, even defining what a just do it is. Do you have any helpful hints on to help out in those situations?
Yeah. As far as the just do it versus, I usually separate things into like just do it, a project versus maybe it's like something bigger like a Kaizen event. The way I personally have always aligned everybody on what those mean is by providing definitions and make sure we have all the same definitions. So with the just do it, and again, this is dependent entirely on your teams, but I said that it could be done by the end of the week. If that's the case, it should just do it. If it takes more than that, you're looking at a project if you know what needs to be done. But if the corrective action is really like we didn't dig deep enough into this RCA to do this specific one, then I will recommend something like a Kaizen event to actually, uncover what the problem is that you put in that corrective action. So making sure everyone is aligned on definitions is really how I make sure everybody is aligned when we decide what the impact or ease of implementation is.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right, poka-yoke, which is a Japanese term meaning mistake proofing or preventing inadvertent errors. We have some common examples pictured on this slide, like traffic signal LED bulbs. They initially had a huge problem with those not being as resilient, so they spent a lot of effort making them almost failure proof. They last a lot longer than the light bulbs in your house. And then parking slot dividers, they're intentionally spaced apart so that you'll hit the parking slot divider, which is cement, and hopefully it won't mess up your car, but it certainly won't mess up the cement block and prevent you from hitting the car that's adjacent to your parking spot. So the importance of poka-yoke and RCA is that it ensures corrective actions don't just fix the problem, but actually prevent reoccurrence, right? Which is the key to having your employees realize that, hey, this RCA process is valuable to us. It's not just going through the steps. We're actually trying to make sure this thing doesn't happen again, whatever that thing may be. So solutions must be designed to make future mistakes difficult or impossible. Now, employee engagement can really help here. In fact, if you don't have the proper amount of employee engagement, this is where you'll likely fail. So in a company I previously worked with, we had gone through an RCA process and identified, the correct root causes according to our problem statement, and we were developing corrective actions that really addressed those root causes at the failure point. And when it came time to, kind of present our findings to the team, the broader team, it was like, oh, that's not going to work. We don't have that machine anymore. Now, we were working on this official corporate SOP document, but that document was no longer in use because that machine had been replaced and the SOP never updated. So these are the kind of things that happen when you do not involve everybody that should be involved. If you had gone on Gemba and involved to at least some extent the employees that are actually out there on the process, they would have pointed out that's the wrong SOP. We don't use that equipment anymore. So overall, busy schedules, communication gaps, and differing opinions can all be barriers here. And getting comprehensive input is the way to resolve that.
So we have a polling question here. How to overcome barriers using mistake proofing solutions. We have some ideas in here. Innovative thinking, HAZOP, that's Aaron's. Aaron, you want to talk a little bit about HAZOP?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this really, in my opinion, the HAZOP kind of leans immediately after you do a causal tree as you're kind of going back and confirming your root causes or digging deeper to obtain those root causes. But it absolutely, if you find that you cannot develop mistake-proof solutions, when it's something like my familiarity with HAZOPs is like chemical process failures. So a HAZOP is a very structured way to get into those specific system failures. And that's going to help you drive to the truer root cause that has all of the, technical expertise that requires. And then you'll be able to overcome those barriers using that.
I love it. The famous FMEA. It's always helpful to identify those. We're going to come back to this. We're going to talk about the very famous diagram next, creating robust corrective actions.
All right, so this is the hierarchy of controls when you're developing corrective actions. So this is a structured framework to develop robust corrective actions. And this is going to help your teams avoid focusing on low impact solutions and target sustainable long-term fixes instead. So this is critical for reoccurrence. And it also addresses that question that we received earlier about what about these actions we're coming up with that are like share information, tell the employees not to do it anymore, add additional PPE. If you look to the bottom of this chart, that's exactly the types of corrective actions we see. These are low impact actions. It's actions like sharing information, right? Additional PPE. These are easy, but they're often ineffective in practice. So teams frequently default to these because they are simple and quick, and they rarely actually prevent future problems. In fact, when I rolled out my last RCA strategy at a company, that was one of the things that I noticed was when we did our very first example RCA prior to getting as far in training as developing robust countermeasures. This is kind of where we defaulted to the lower end of the chart. Now, on the higher end, we have high impact solutions. So, for example, the very top is eliminate. That's if you could shoot for one action item, one corrective action from an RCA, you'd love it to be an eliminate, which is redesigning a process to remove the failure point entirely. So an example of this might be if somebody slipped or fell off of a ladder, you would replace that ladder with a permanent platform if possible to prevent, that act from ever reoccurring again and totally eliminating the chance for injury there, or at least in that situation, right? Now, these changes create long-term resilience, but they are more complex. So if you're having a hard time developing the shutdown, control, or eliminate end of this matrix, maybe go back to the root causes and make sure you actually identified the real failure points that led to your problem.
Yeah, and I'll just add a few comments on this slide, and that is, think of it as even the y is a function of x, but a y, if you eliminate the y on what is happening at that level, you're at the eliminate stage, or a sub y, let's say, of your tree, your causal tree, and you get to your x's and control and shutdown, and you're getting to your causes as you move further down into the tree. So you can kind of align this to say, as Aaron said, ultimately you want to get a Y or a sub Y. You want to eliminate those from ever happening again by designing them out of the process and eliminating that entirely, which is that means you're going to replace that subsystem or the overall way that root cause or how that overall Y will occur, which is a little bit more difficult. So actually coming up with these is not easy, and that's why you really need a concerted effort, a separate brainstorming just on developing robust corrective actions. With that, I think we'll go right back to the word cloud here, and we're seeing quite a bit of action here, lots of ideas. Irene, what are your thoughts?
Some great ideas that have popped up here. One area that is really important here, and I'm going to focus on operator and operators, came up twice actually in the conversation. It's really talking to the folks that are at that process to make sure that whatever you're putting in place is going to work and is feasible and is workable. You don't want to put in administrative controls that people are going to forget. It's just another added thing to their daily checklist versus getting rid of the problem by either taking away the hazard or instituting process control. So really making sure that you have that inclusivity in your process and you talk to the operators to get their perspectives is absolutely critical to make sure that one, everyone's engaged, and two, aligned on that potential mistake-proof solution.
Yeah, just to build on that, something that came to my mind is like an interlock that you is a common type. It's like, well, why was that person there? Well, when you're in that operating mode, nobody should be in that part of the building, and then aligning an interlock so that it prevents. It has to take a manual override, and the control room would have to authorize only to allow entry into that particular area. So, like you said, the gamba getting down and dirty, so to speak, with what is actually happening and understanding those scenarios is so vital. Aaron, any other thoughts?
Yeah, there was actually an exercise I did it was actually an RCA I was working through last week. And when it came to developing the countermeasures and really trying to develop mistake-proof solutions, and I wouldn't recommend doing this on every RCA, but we thought it'd be fun to go ask ChatGPT, what are the ways, because we thought we had built a good eliminate level counter action that was really mistake proof. So we said, what are 5 ways that this countermeasure could fail? And then we provided a little background and context about what the system looked like, but no more than 2 or 3 sentences. And it spit out, 30 seconds later, 5 real topic points that we got to discuss as a team. It was like, oh, maybe 3 of them, that doesn't make sense. It didn't quite understand our context, but 2 of them were a good talking point. And I thought that was really an interesting way to help try and develop mistake-proof solutions and then test them kind of digitally per se.
So when your team runs out of ideas, go to ChatGPT to get some more ideas. I agree full-heartedly. With that, I'll just cover a tool that was developed over 25 years ago, or about 20 years ago, that a good friend of mine, Dr. Greg McLaughlin, and I developed back in the early 2000s. It's called the Control FMEA, and it's really taking what you've done already, is whatever you think those improvements are, each one of those improvements needs a control mechanism. So now you want to look at those inputs and the possible ways it can fail again. So now you're doing what we traditionally say, well, we're doing an FMEA on the improved solutions, whatever those improved controls are. But we're looking at it a little bit differently, and we're accepting that you can't plan for everything, but we're going to design remedial actions around those solutions. So again, you look at each process step or each process component and the inputs and outputs. You do your spec limits, the typical things you do in design. You do your gauge R&R to make sure you can measure those outputs and inputs. And you try to automate as much of those as you can. And then from the FMEA, you're doing the FMEA in there. I didn't list all those columns. And you're really identifying the who, where, and when. And a reaction plan. The most important thing is you're coming up with a remedial action for those high risk areas that you identify that are still present in your improved design. So then incorporating this into your solutions, your routines, into your SOPs, into visual controls, and any other ways that you can to drive to get that robust control plan. With that, I'll turn it over to Irene.
So remember earlier in the presentation, we talked about really good ideas and potential solutions. Sometimes a good idea will come up. It's out of scope with the process, but you don't want to lose it. Have a designated area on the wall or a flip chart or a large sheet of paper and capture those, either the questions or the solutions that are out of scope, and make sure that they're reviewed at the end of the day. You call it the parking lot. You try to resolve those with some follow-up that day, or follow-up by the next day, just to really make sure that employees feel heard. And the reason being is that people are going to participate. They might meander off topic, and they'll raise something that's really important to them or really important to the process, but it's indirectly related or in a separate area. You want to make sure that you capture that thought and then respond back to it. Each step of this RCA process ensures employee engagement, and that is absolutely critical to not only the success of your RCA, but building high performance work teams. So, like I said, every single step requires employee engagement to ensure success. It's not just some person sitting alone in a conference room driving it. Every single one of the steps we described has full inclusive participation. It allows for that employee ownership, and the actions will feel sustained versus heard. When employees feel heard, they're going to respond and participate in the solution more often. And it provides that employee engagement. It provides your foundation to slash those risk events and prevent them from reoccurring.
Thanks, Irene. We have a question in the chat here on how may contributing, how there are many contributing factors to an incident. One
Hmm.
cause is ineffective supervision. This can
Hmm.
get tricky and devolve into politics. How does one remedy this tricky cause? Easy question.
So yeah, and it is tricky,
It's very
especially
tricky.
if politics are involved. And so, first of all, I would probe a little deeper than ineffective supervision. Why was it ineffective? Were they not able to be in the control room and out at the floor at the same time? Did they have training? Were they a newly promoted operator that became a first line supervisor and didn't have leadership training? And so I would say that if you stop at the person, you might not be getting some of the root causes that are underlying the issue. I know in one of my um, companies that I work for, that was something that was recognized was ineffective leadership training for first line supervisors. And so they standardized what is in that training and trained all of the first line supervisors to this so everyone knew what was expected of them. And they also heard from the first line supervisors of what some of their difficulties were. Did the pagers work in every single portion of the plant? Things like that. So you want to keep digging to find out why that supervision was ineffective.
Excellent. And now we're on to our case studies. And both Irene and Aaron are going to talk about two case studies. Irene on plan availability, and Aaron will kick us off with paperwork and, of course, salient communication. Aaron.
Yes, absolutely. So this is a company I worked with a few years ago, and this story really stuck with me because it really was over the course of a couple of weeks. We went from employees that truly hated the RCA process, to be quite frank, um, to actually actively participating and wanting to participate in it. And really, what we did was we had a company-wide focus after a poor RCA rollout, where we were working to break free from the cycle of like short-term fixes. That was all of our countermeasures, and actually start addressing true root causes. So the problem we were faced with once we started digging into what our overall RCA strategy looked like was that documentation was bloated, and on the same hand, totally misaligned with the team's actual goals that were doing these RCAs. So instead of finding true root causes, we were overwhelmed by paperwork and focused on getting quick fixes. And this led to missing larger patterns. And as a result, we had lingering issues. So we were focused on the wrong metrics, and we knew that that was causing reoccurring incidents. But we had data and processes in place. Robust data sets were available, but we failed to actually extract any meaningful insights from them. And as a result of this, disconnected and disengaged employees were pretty frequent in RCA sessions. So what did we do? We simplified and streamlined documentation, which worked to reduce complexity and allow the team to actually focus on real issues. Again, on the question of how do you get employees, especially hourly employees who are tight on time and have shifts to complete involved in this, making sure it's simple and streamlined for them is the key answer there. We also took it a step further and automated key parts of the prep process, which freed up the facilitators and team leads to engage more deeply in collaboration and root cause identification, whereas before they were just trying to pull any information they could together to complete this RCA. Ultimately, this empowered employees to become active participants rather than just passive process participants. Now, I will caution, a word of caution about the solution I just said. And I actually saw a quote earlier this week that perfectly matched it. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler, which was said, which is a condensed version of what Albert Einstein said actually in a lecture. And there are parts of the RCA process that you can simplify, but there are core pieces that should be left to dedicate real time as a team on, like building a causal tree, brainstorming countermeasures, the busy work is what we want to automate and streamline as much as possible, not where the teamwork really happens. So in this specific case, the team ended up saving about $500,000 a year, which was associated with about 30% lower incidents that would cause this specific type of RCA. And then we took it a step further and integrated the new RCA approach that we had developed into leader standard work, which helped embed it into the company culture, right? So that helped us build lasting momentum, and we ultimately were able to transform problem solving into a daily practice. It wasn't always a multi-week long problem solving, but a lot of the tools from a full RCA were used day to day by the team. So I'll leave you with simplicity leads to clarity, which in turn can lead you with lasting solutions, but do not just make things simple just for the sake of simplicity, for sure. Thank you.
In this second case, it focused on plant reliability. Plant reliability was mixed performance across an operational fleet of facilities in the United States. These are small plants. The other challenges that we had were that key KPIs were not being measured, and it was scattered. One plant was measuring one thing, the other plant was measuring another, and people were not trained in root cause analysis. And so the solution was we instituted standardized KPIs to measure. And we really made sure that we're all measuring things at the same point and the same methodology, so that you're comparing apples to apples, if you will. We trained operational personnel on the RCA methodology across the board, and then across the plant manager teams, which met on a weekly basis, instituted sharing of key incidences and key learnings and some of their root cause analysis, their corrective actions across that plant manager network, which really started fostering a dialogue across the team. Instead of operating as independent silos, it became more of a cohesive team. They helped each other problem solve. They helped each other with some of their solutions. They learned from each other. And the monetary impact was that we were able to improve internal plant reliability by 5% across the business. So making sure that you have those standardized KPIs and you have proper training, that's a key part of operational excellence.
Thanks, Irene. Great story. Aaron, fantastic stories of changing culture. I think we said everything but the word culture, so I'll say it. Because it is a mindset. I just want to add that in. And what actions have they taken? So we have quite a number of additional comments in here. Thank you, everyone, for your comments here. Aaron, any closing comments on this slide on what new ideas that came to you?
Yeah, I'd just like to I would like to close with saying that, automating repetitive tasks and fostering meaningful team engagement culture per se results in both financial but also cultural gains, which is how you're going to have a long-term problem solving habit within your teams. So when you see busy work, try and slash it, try and automate it, and that's your teams will certainly appreciate it.
Irene?
And so on another note too, ensuring inclusion and making sure you have an open forum is really important to the employee engagement piece, to participate. And that's one of the things I'm taking away from a lot of this word cloud. And with that, the other thing that's important is some of the tools and methodologies that Aaron had discussed allows for those remote attendees to feel like they're fully present in that room. And that is also a critical part of that employee engagement. You want to think of yourself as not working in a tiny little island by yourself, but you're connected electronically to a greater team.
So building that culture of inclusion where everybody feels compelled and invigorated to voice their opinions and keep the ball rolling, and don't allow complacency to creep in to your RCA process to say, oh, the subject matter expert will handle it. My opinion doesn't matter. Does that sum up it
Yep.
a little bit?
Great summation.
Thank you. And thank you. And thank you all for participating in this survey. So we're going to get to the next section, which is the financials. And at the end of the day, very often, well, we all know it comes from the top down. So leadership has to believe that these RCAs are important things to do, these events, and they need to allocate it, and they need to set the culture of the organization to believe in this. And so, there's the other way to do is to talk about financial impact. It's like it should be almost part of your EHS, environmental health safety mindset, or SHE, or whichever acronym you prefer to use. But it's very closely linked to that. And there's a lot of different things that you need to take into account the financial impacts of these RCA events. And if you're able to reduce them, then it's very important. But most of all, it's especially in these hardy environments, oil and gas and chemicals, you don't want anybody to lose their life, God forbid. And that's the saddest thing that happens when doing that type of an RCA event, and should be at the foremost of everyone's mind. But then there's the dollars and cents of it, and that is beyond the lawsuits that can often bankrupt a company when you do have a loss of life. You're getting into lost days of work, you get into lost days of workers' work, you get lost days of production. And, everybody should know what it costs when you're down. So what is your downtime? How many dollars does it cost you per day or per shift when you're down and you're not operating? That should be known by everyone. It shouldn't just be known at the top. So everybody understands the sense of urgency to keep it rolling, but not keep it to the point of a brink of teetering on an unplanned shutdown and a forced outage. The other area is centered around your brand of your company to attract employees to work there, and labor relations, community relationships. And I'd label that as brand. Your brand is very important. And if your brand is not there, then you're not going to be able to attract the workers to work in your facility, which is going to drive a lot of those things at the bottom of this list, which are just as important as anything else. Aaron, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the real key to tying RCAs directly back to financial impact is focusing on making sure that you identified that real root cause so there isn't reoccurrence. I mean, reoccurrence is the ticket. A lot of times if you've ever sat down and done an exercise on an ROI using any of these financial metrics, and what this RCA will do for the bottom line, it really is about making sure that RCA had a lasting impact. Because if it was just a one-off, I mean, those financials don't make sense. But RCAs can be designed to drive to those right solutions, right? So I think to get to this financial impact, you need to make sure that the solutions you're developing prevent reoccurrence.
Thanks, Aaron. Irene?
So we talked about earlier, how do you engage your leadership? Really understanding and clearly communicating the financial impact of those opportunities ensures their support and alignment. And so that's absolutely critical. The labor relations and community relations piece, the human aspect, is really important. And why is that? If you have a union site and you're working on labor relations, having that inclusive opportunity, will help with the labor relations as well as your community relationships. And that is absolutely critical.
Thanks, Irene. And we'll close it out with this slide on the business case to perform root cause analysis. You know, from a financial perspective, the employee injuries provides an avenue for engagement, as we've discussed. And of course, the benefits of root cause analysis are, as was mentioned by Aaron and Irene, prevents further reoccurrences, treats your employees with respect, and enhances the bottom line. So I think, Irene, you brought up a great point there about in treating your employees with respect, especially in the union environments. It's really an opportunity to build a better relationship with those union folks, between the business and the unions. This is uses not as a wedge, but as an opportunity to build that stronger relationship, as you alluded to there, Irene. Any other further thoughts, Irene?
No, I mean, this entire process is an opportunity for engaging with your employees who are actually in the room or are online using, some of the tools that Aaron mentioned. So that helps build that foundation for continuous improvement.
Aaron, closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, nothing is more of a positive reinforcement to having your employees participate in these RCAs than going through the process, seeing that their voices was heard, and then seeing a countermeasure that they were a part of out in the field solving a problem. I mean, that is truly empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. With that, we'll close out the webinar. We believe we covered these deliverables in pretty good detail. Looking at best practices, some case studies, a little bit of an introduction to AI/ML, which we will dive deep into it next month, and of course, linking to the bottom line, which we all have to have our story as to management, why we need to assign resources and why RCA is important. Everybody should have an elevator speech on that, on exactly what that is about, and hopefully your leaders will eventually be saying your elevator speech or some version of it to everyone, so it will become part of the culture of your organization. Again, our next webinar is next month, bringing in those digital and AI ML tools. So we look forward to seeing you. If you have any questions or comments of this webinar, suggestions on what we can do better for the next webinar, or more in an area that you would like to see us focus, please do reach out to any of us. And with that, we have some closing comments. Irene?
Well, first of all, I appreciated everyone's participation in the word cloud, and we've got a lot of really good upgrades to some of the initial thoughts. So thank you for taking the time to not only participate, but to listen to this presentation. This is a critical process. We did not dive deep into the technical tools because this really takes a lot longer to do the technical details for root cause failure analysis. But it is really about highlighting what are the key aspects to engage your employees, because at the end of the day, each process is done by your employees and the team. You have to make sure they're fully engaged in the process and support it so that you can continue to drive on.
Thanks, Irene. Aaron?
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for having me on, and Irene for joining in on this conversation. It was an excellent conversation, a lot of fun. Thank you to a great audience for all of your participation and feedback. I always enjoy a webinar where I learn as much as I hopefully taught some people. And I'm excited to really dig into some of the technology tools that we can use to actually enhance these best practices and make everyone's RCA process more robust. Thank
And I
you.
want a special thanks to Aaron and Irene for putting together this webinar. Fantastic job. And we all learn, as Aaron says, we're learning together, and we're always learning every day. That's what's fun. And again, thank you all for your participation, your questions, your comments, your participation in the clouds. That's what makes the webinar fun. And again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. RCA is, it's a common tool, but how do you slash those risk events into actually opportunities for your company is really what we're trying to get at. And if you know how to manage risk, like Mr. Bronson said, you know, you can turn all those risks into opportunities and fly to wherever you need to fly or go as deep as you need to go. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.